Hi, everybody. I am very happy to have my friend and RR member, Seth D. Jones, the Reverend Seth D. Jones, talk to us about his experience with a study down at Johns Hopkins and his subsequent thesis writing based on that experience. So with that, why don't you let the folks know who Seth Jones is?
Sure. Thanks, Pierce. This is fun. I'm glad we're doing this. And so I'm Seth Jones. I'm the pastor of Rockland Congregational Church here in Maine, and I've been here almost 11 years. It'll be 11 years in November. And how far back do you want to go? Do you want to?
Whatever you think's relevant to our talk.
Yeah, I was thinking about that, and I was thinking about in terms of what we'll be talking about. And I thought about how Gordon White always begins his podcast by asking, were you a weird kid? Or did you have a weird childhood? I can't remember exactly how he phrases it, but so I was a weird kid. And I had, I grew up in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, and was I had all kinds of strange little experiences, spiritual experiences and whatnot. Grew up in the Congregational Church from about the third grade on, and went away to college in Northfield, Minnesota at St. Olaf College, which is renowned for their music department and their singing. And met my wife there in a Shakespeare class, and majored in English literature and minored in art, studio art. And then once we graduated, Kate and I lived in Minneapolis, or in St. Paul, Minnesota for quite a while. And while we're in St. Paul, I started seminary at United Theological Seminary of the Twin Cities. And while there, I joined a Tai Chi school and started studying Tai Chi. And that's sort of been a lifelong study for me. However, what I will add about the Tai Chi school is after we were a part of that for about 4.5 years, we all moved in together into one house and became a commune, which lasted for about 5 or 6 years. And the commune essentially, I don't, to say it was a full-on cult might not be fair, but it certainly had many aspects that were cult-like. And that was a growing experience. But once I graduated from seminary, my first time with a Master of Arts in Religious Studies, and my my final project for that was on the Gnostics. And so I did a lot of research into them. And then I taught Tai Chi classes. I was in the financial industry for quite a while. And then through a series of events, I was way outside the church by this point. Through a series of events, I ended up returning to the Christian church and realized that I'd been called to the ministry. I'd been called to the ministry back when I was about 16 years old. And this whole circuitous mess through my life led me back. And I remembered when we started going to church again And so I started seminary again after about a year and a half at the church at Luther Seminary in St. Paul, Minnesota, and graduated there in June of 2008 and was ordained in June of 2008. And my first church was in Yellowstone National Park, and which was gorgeous. And we were there for about a year and 9 months, and then came out here. So since I've been here, I've been pastor here in Rockland in Maine, and in about April of 2018, our good friend Andy sent me a email or an ad that he'd seen and said, "You'd be great for this." And it was the psychedelic study through Johns Hopkins with Roland Griffith and William Richards, were sort of icons in the new psychedelic movement. And so I applied for it and made it through various hurdles, and we can talk about that process if you want, which I think is actually part of the extraordinary spiritual experience. And I went through 2 sessions at Johns Hopkins in December of 2018 and then in January of 2019. And then later on in 2019, through another experience with our friend Andy, I ended up starting a Doctor of Ministry program with Portland Seminary out in Oregon with Dr. Leonard Sweet, who is, he's written a ton of books and is sort of a worldwide preacher. And so he teaches a course, a doctorate program at Portland Seminary called Semiotics, Church, and Culture. So I am now studying to be a semiotician, as it's called, a student of symbols and signs and how to read them. So that's the down and dirty.
Yeah, so just for our audience, because this will be, well, it's relevant anyway. You applied for the Hopkins study with no real history with psychedelics or much with illicit drugs generally, right?
That's right. Yeah. I've had virtually. I had a really bad experience with some pot brownies, and that's pretty much my only sort of. I don't want to use the word illicit. That's the wrong word, but my sort of extra curricular activity with any sort of drug. And then I had a great morphine experience after knee surgery once, and so that has taken on more meaning for me since my Johns Hopkins experience. But yes, I've had no experience whatsoever with psychedelics.
And what do you think prompted Andy to say, this is something that you should do? And what do you think, and what would you say inside of you said, yeah, this is something I should do?
Yeah, I think, well, Andy and I have talked a lot about alternate, other realities, other states of consciousness quite a bit. And as you know, he's a big Emanuel Swedenborg guy. And Emanuel Swedenborg essentially made a common practice out of entering into, for all practical purposes, what looks like a psychedelic state, probably through some weird holotropic breath work thing that he learned from, I don't know, the Swedish shamans or something. And but so Andy and I have had a lot of conversations about altered states and alternate states and other realities. And so I think when he saw that, he immediately thought of me. He knew he wouldn't be able to clear the hurdles to do the study. And he thought I would probably be able to. And so, we'd been talking a bit off and on about Michael Pollan's book. I've read most of it. I haven't read the whole thing. And some interviews we'd heard. And then in terms of my personal interest, even though I've never taken psychedelics, I've always been interested. I've always had this sort of weird fascination. And being a child of the 70s and 80s, I knew early on that the music that I liked best was not coming from just just the person. They'd done stuff. And so I did a lot of research. I knew a whole lot about psychedelics long before I ever did this study. And so Jimi Hendrix used to say that all his music was received music. Who knows if he was just playing with the reporters or dead serious, but he believed, like Sun Ra too. Sun Ra believed he was receiving the music and from external sources and multi-dimensional sources. And so I've known that stuff my entire teenage and adult life. But when I was a teenager, this is what made me a weird kid in part. I started Zen meditation on my own when I was like 16 years old. And I do it, I don't know. I tried to do it twice a day, and I carried that off for quite a while. And I was self-taught, which is the worst possible way to do that stuff. But I've always been sort of synesthetic. When I listen to music, I see shapes and colors, and I have a hypersensitive sense of smell, and so and plus I have a bunch of weird mystical experiences in my background. And so when I saw what this study was all about, I didn't even think twice. I sent an email the same day and interviewed with John, who was their sort of, I don't know what you'd call him, the administrator for the psychedelic department at Johns Hopkins. And
in a lot of ways, you're kind of the ideal guy.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
You don't have bad trips from abusing these things. You don't.
Right.
And yet you are very well versed in the literature, generally speaking, meaning mystical, alternative. You're no stranger to spiritual practices and disciplines.
That's right. Yeah.
I mean, in a way, and when you told me about all this, I was like, what do you mean you've never taken drugs? Like, it's just really, from where I sit, that's strange.
Yeah. Well, I have when I was in the 9th grade, one of my classmates, I'll just name him. The guy was a jerk. There's a lot of people with this name, so he'll probably never hear this, but Bill Larson sat next to me in shop class. And this is part of why I've never done it. Part of why I had never done it up until this point is pure rebellion. He sat next to me, and he asked me if I wanted to drop acid and during shop class. And he had his friends. He was part of the burnout crowd. And I said, you know, I'm kind of happy with my reality the way it is right now. And that set him off. He grabbed me by the shirt collar and cocked his fist. I looked over at the teacher in my shop class. The teacher looked at what was about to happen and left the room. And I got the shit kicked out of me in 9th grade shop class. And because
you wouldn't take acid.
That's right. Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah. And so part of my not taking any drugs in high school, and it was a direct rebellion, because there was no way I was going to give those people the satisfaction of my giving in to their bullying, you know.
So anything really stand out in the vetting process?
Yeah, you know, it was for me, I don't know if this, well, let me just say, when I started the vetting process, I made it through. They send you a bunch of questionnaires, psychological profile questionnaires, to make sure you're not, you know, you're not a borderline personality, or that you have some deep-seated condition that might push you over the edge. And so I filled all those out and I cleared them. And then they fly you down to Baltimore for an in-person interview and a full medical workup. And so it's a pretty intensive vetting process. And when I got to Baltimore, I want to say I flew down in June. So I applied in late April, went through all the questionnaires and everything, and then they scheduled me to fly down there in June for the full deal. And so it's an intensive process. And when I got down there, you know, you spend a couple hours just talking about what they're going to be doing and everything in study and what the study is all about. And at the time, I was the last person to go through the study. I was number 24. They did this with 24 people. And it's been, at that time, it had been going on for 4.5 years. So it took them 4.5 years to, one, find spiritual leaders and clergy who were willing to do this, and two, and this is the harder part, I think, finding spiritual leaders and clergy who were healthy enough, who could clear the health hurdles for it. So the day I got down there, and they do the initial workup in the morning, which is just blood pressure and fever and stuff. And my blood pressure was 166 over 110, which is the highest it's ever been in my life. I hate hospitals. I don't like doctors. And I was fully surrounded by the whole thing. And, you know, and I was excited and interested and weirded out and all of that. And so my blood pressure was through the roof. And I would also add that the blood pressure rules had changed the year before. And so now the standard, which I didn't find out for them, the standard that had to be met was anything under 130 over 90. Because 130 over 90 is now the threshold for high blood pressure. 30 years ago, it was 200 over 140.
Whoa.
So it just keeps coming down. And so, so later in the day, my blood pressure was around like I don't know, it was in the 130s and like high 90s or something. So I wasn't clearing that cutoff, but they let me go through the whole thing. And oh, and I also discovered that day they do an electrocardiogram as well. And I discovered that I have the thing, you know, when college students are playing basketball and they're running down the court and they drop and they're dead before they hit the ground.
You have
It's often, yeah, it's often because of what's called a long QT, which means on the upbeat. So your heart does that. There's like a pause before the second beat. And the longer that is, the more likely your heart won't catch. And so apparently I have a long QT. And so that was interesting, but primarily it was the blood pressure. And so after all of this, the vetting for the medical, you go upstairs, and I had about a 2.5, 3 hour conversation with one of the guides and the therapist, social worker who's on staff at the psychedelic lab, Mary Cosimano, wonderful woman. And she has a 250-page book that you go through of questions, you know, and it's like, if the answer here is no, then go to page 34. You know, if it's yes, then you've got 3 pages of questions. And so, and it takes hours to go through it. And so I hadn't cleared the medical. I almost didn't clear the questions because I have a half aunt in my background who had schizophrenia. And so there was a moment there where I was almost sent home. But then I got through that, and they said, well, you can do this if you get your blood pressure under control. And then for the next 3 months, June, July, August, September, for 4 months, 3 or 4 months, I was calling, I would have to give blood pressure readings over Zoom or Skype to John, the administrator at Johns Hopkins, and to see if I could get it down. And I finally went on blood pressure medication, and they still weren't saying yes. So I had to force the issue. And so you need to tell me yes or no here, because I can't keep trying to plan this. I'm willing to go through it. And so once I and I get a little weird and aggressive, I told Roland Griffiths, who's been doing this since 2000, you know, he was one of the very first people who was able to use psychedelics in research studies again after it was banned. And when did they ban it? 77? No, 72. I think 1970. Anyway, so he was one of the very first. I told him, maybe Roland, you should do a study on how psychedelics help people with high blood pressure. So I you know, I should be more careful how I talk about stuff. But anyway, they finally let me in, and I was really glad they did. And so we scheduled my trips, my journeys, experiences for December and January.
So before we get into that,
Yeah.
maybe just a little bit about the study itself, what it is, what its roots, origins are, and what it's trying to find out.
So Bill Richards sort of designed the study that I went through, and Bill Richards is sort of one of those background people for all of psychedelic research back in the day. He knew Albert Hoffman. He his best friend was Walter Pankey, who is a big wig in all of this. You know, Timothy Leary, Ram Dass. He knew all those people. But one of the great experiments in psychedelic history is what's known as the Marsh Chapel experiment, which was in 1962, I want to say. It was designed by Timothy Leary and Ram Dass and Walter Pankey as well. And basically what that was they took a group of, it's called the Good Friday experiment. They took a group of theology students, seminary students, and for a Good Friday service, before the Good Friday service, they gave half of them, I think there were like 50 in all, and they gave half of them psilocybin and half of them niacin, which is basically one of the ingredients in aspirin, you know. So it can trigger some of the early physical effects of psilocybin, but it doesn't go into a full trip. And so they gave 25 theology students psilocybin just to see what would happen. And so some of them had incredibly powerful experiences. I don't think it was 25. I think it was less than that. But Howard Thurman preached at the service, and you can find it on, it's an incredible sermon.
Oh, really? So, you find it? I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's out there now. It took me a long time to find it. I finally found it a few months ago. And his big booming voice, you know, and and so he's preaching this incredible sermon. All the while these people are tripping hard. And but one of the guys who came out of that was Houston Smith.
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and who's the other one? There's somebody else. I can't remember who, but somebody else like Houston Smith. And anyway, so the study that I went through was sort of loosely designed on that. And the big difference, of course, is that we're not all together. It's individuals coming through one at a time, taking this stuff. And really, the only thesis for the study was that they just want to show that psilocybin psychedelics can trigger mystical experiences. And that is the sole purpose of the study.
And so then why clergy?
Because they, well, Bill Richards in particular, seemed to think that clergy and spiritual leaders were particularly primed, I guess you'd say, for the mystical experience. And so the other aspect to the study is also a long-term aspect to it. And so the study is once you commit to it, you're committing to about 2 years, because a year and a half is what you're committing to. And so you do the experiences, and then there's follow-up, integration follow-up with your guides. And then following that, there's a full battery of interviews 6 months out, and then a year out from that 6-month point. So it's a year and a half total for each person going through the study. And what they want to see is how long the impact lasts, what the effect on ministry is, or, you know, if you're like a if you're a Roshi and it's in 10 or something, you'd be looking at how that impacts as well. Uh, and so it's a bit more long term than just the sort of loosely done Marsh Chapel experience. But really, finally, the study is simply this. Let's see what happens when we give really high doses of psilocybin to people who are already invested in the spiritual experience. You know?
Mhm.
And I think that's finally, it's an excuse to give pastors and spiritual leaders, an incredible experience. So,
Well, then let's get into the two experiences.
all right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, you were there uh, before and after, so you're one of the first people I told about the full thing for both of them. And so, but yeah, uh, I think it's important. This all happened in Baltimore. I think it's important to understand the setting because, as you know, set and setting is a huge thing in the psychedelic world. Um, I think there's a lot of value to that, but I'm also uh, I'm not convinced it's the thing that changes everything about the experience. I think, but nonetheless, they go out of their way to try to make the set and the setting comfortable and good at the Johns Hopkins. So you're not in a hospital room, you're in this really nice room with recessed lighting and nice pictures on the wall. And there's a comfortable couch. They put eye shades on you and headphones. And so you're lying down and it's very quiet and there's incredible music. They have a curated playlist for this that they've developed over 20 years and that tracks the wavelength of the experience. And
Same playlist for everyone.
no, they change it up according to what you're. So there's like a series of songs for each part, and they might play different ones for where you are in the experience. But where you are in the experience generally tracks with other people, so
Yeah.
so there might be like 6 songs for the run up to the second wave of the trip, so and you might get 3 of them. And so anyway, and so the set and the setting is you have 2 guides with you, and I think that's important as well. And so my guides for my first journey were Mary Cosimano and William Richards, and I had met with them 2.5 hours the day before, plus probably another 5 or 6 hours before that over Skype, and so they knew me really well by the time I get in there. And so so there's the set and the setting, and then it's also ritualized. They ritualize the experience, and so so there's a shamanic element that I think is really valuable to the whole process, in the sense that a shaman doesn't just take stuff to find out the answer to whatever the problem is for the community. They also do a ritual around it in order to generate the proper mindset or feeling. And so it's not a huge ritual, but you take a few minutes and calm yourself and take a few deep breaths and just sit in silence. And then all the players are there. So Roland comes in and they have a little clay sort of goblet that they put the medicine in, the psilocybin in, which, by the way, is a blue pill. I think that's important. It's a blue pill. It is not the red pill. It's a blue pill. And 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 you know, and so, and then there's a rose on the table that you get to take home with you, and it's all very gentle and ritualized. And then you take the psilocybin, and you know, and it takes 20 minutes for effects to start kicking in, 20 to 30 minutes. And so you look through picture books. They have these beautiful picture books, and talk about various things. And then it starts. And so they lay you down and put the eye shades on and put the music on. And so my first journey, I almost as soon as I put everything on, I saw the most beautiful purple I've ever seen in my life. It was this incredibly radiant purple glow. And then it, you know, and then it starts expanding out into patterns. My body felt like it was filling with water. And so I had no sense of where I was in space. You know, it was very strange. And then my arms and my legs started feeling like they were in impossible positions, you know, like they were, I can't even describe it, like they were attached in weird ways and unusual and facing different directions. My head felt like it was upside down. It was so weird, as you know, as weird as any of this is. And then the patterns start, you know, I started seeing all the patterns, and I found out what the name is for those patterns. They're called Kluver form constants. And so, and they're repeatable. And apparently there's categories for these that you can track across people who've had psychedelic experiences. The Kluver form constants are one of these weird sort of effects. And what's interesting about them is they're all geometric. I'm sure, you know, others have seen these as well who've done this. And they're these deep multidimensional geometric shapes that defy mathematics or are beyond the mathematics we know, you know. And so so I've seen those, and this all lasted probably for 40 minutes or so. And then I had to get up and go to the bathroom, and I lay back down, and all that was still happening. And the music had expanded so that I was hearing it in different levels, and incredibly beautiful. And then I just got bored. I was like, so is this it? Is it, I asked my guides, I was like, is this it? I mean, am I just going to see patterns and hear music weird? Because I can kind of trigger this for myself. I mean, this is much clearer and much more vivid, but you know, I've done enough meditation and deep stuff to have seen some of these things before and experienced it in this way. And Bill was funny. Bill said, well, you know, there's usually a bit of a wave, and then things will start. So you just need to wait. And it'll happen. And almost as, you know, within 3 minutes of them saying that, you know, you're sort of ratcheting up to the top of the roller coaster, and then you're in. And I started getting really afraid and shaking, cold and everything. And I didn't really know where it was coming from. And so Mary came over and took my hand and just sat with me. The guides are great. I think everyone, I would never want to do this stuff alone after having had guides. with it. You know, I think the guided experience, at least for me, was exceptional. And so Mary took my hand. Uh, there was a Siamese cat that showed up, and he would wander through the space, and I still had the headphones and the stuff on, and then he'd wander away as if I were to follow him. So I tried to follow him, and then all of a sudden, I'm standing at the top of this massive black onyx sort of spiral staircase that just went down and down and down. And I was with some sort of being, like an angelic sort of being, not really a face. And it just had a very calming sense about her or him. And I was in this space where there were these shimmering, glittering lights running through like a water or a river. And we started walking down the staircase. And as we got down, I don't know how far, but we were down a ways. And all of a sudden, it was like the whole universe just flashed into existence, or I finally saw what it actually was. And it was this vast, shimmering, glittering cathedral. It was so incredibly beautiful. And it's like it held everything. And it was made of these shimmering, multi-dimensional bricks, I guess, or I don't know, but they were all these different colors, and they were even colors that were off the spectrum. I mean, I would not be able to name some of the colors I saw, and it was just fantastically beautiful. Probably one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen in my life, and that kind of stayed through the whole experience. I was aware through my whole experience of this sort of container, this vast container that I was in. The shimmering cathedral is what I came out calling it. But it looked a lot like the mosaic sort of mosques, some of them fantastic mosaic mosques in, you know, the Middle East, or like a Tibetan temple with the mandalas and all these shifting shapes. But the other place it reminded me of was the Hagia Sophia, with that vast ceiling and antechambers and stuff. And so it was just incredible. And we got to the bottom of this staircase, and I was laid down in like this river or something, and I was laid down in this transparent, I don't even know what I call it a transport device. It was not really a coffin, but I could see through it, and I was laid down in it, and the angel being left, and it was a sort of a death experience. My ears were ringing, my head hurt. I was pretty sure I was dying, but I wasn't afraid of it. And then I like, in the way these things work, I sort of went under, over, and through something and came out the other side. And this woman greeted me, and this woman who greeted me was one of my very close friends from the church, who died probably 5 years ago. So it would have been 4 years ago when I went through my experience. And she welcomed me on the other side and said, "Oh, I'm so glad you're here. Come with me." And I burst into tears. And all the grief that I've sort of held inside particularly as a minister, I've done over 100 funerals since I've been here, and most of them people in my congregation. And so all this grief started coming out, and I was crying and everything. And this friend of mine, Jean, she said, "Oh, would you just stop? Just, just stop and follow me. Come on." It was hilarious. She was hilarious. I loved Jean, and she took me through these antechambers of the cathedral, like these sort of little chapel places, and they were equally beautiful. And then we came up and out, and we were on this cobblestone street in Paris, and it was night, and it was, I'm pretty sure it was off the Champs-Élysées. I was in Paris in like 1987, and only there for a few days. But it was night. There were lights hanging from the awnings and things, and the chairs were still out in the cafes and stuff, and there was nobody out. It was like 2 or 3 in the morning or something. And she just opened her arms and said, this is pretty much where I hang out now. And so I just I said, "So you're telling me that heaven is Paris at night?" She's like, yeah, heaven is Paris at night. And way off in the distance, my ego was like floating way back here. My sense of self was removed, but it was still there. But my ego was like, does this mean I'm going to have to learn French now? It was hilarious. But heaven is Paris at night, and there was all this grief around it too. Once Jean left, there was all this grief, and I sort of wanted to see the world without the music or the face mask on, and so I took all those off and was sitting up, and your body is so weird in that space, and my movements seem to move through different dimensions and sort of fractal out, and it was like everything was lit from underneath in multiple dimensions. It was unbelievably beautiful. And then, you just start talking, and I was talking about grief and beauty and all sorts of stuff with my guides. And one of the things I began to realize was, first of all, the way information is accessed under the psilocybin experience. So for this first experience, they give you about 20 milligrams per 150 pounds. So I was 23, 24 milligrams of psilocybin. And I don't know, that seems like a lot. So, but you're accessing information from different channels, and so memories come in different ways, and you remember things in ways you haven't remembered them before, and thoughts come in that are powerful thoughts. And one of the thoughts I had was, we destroy what's beautiful. We can't stand being in the face of the beautiful, so we have to destroy it. And I had this sort of prophetic moment where I realized that grief and beauty are bound up somehow in this world, and that they can't be separated. And I'm still trying to discern what that connection is between them. And also another thought that came to me as well, or sort of a revelation or prophecy even, is that beauty is leaving the earth, and that the beautiful is leaving the earth. And so there was this profound sense of loss and grief in the midst of all of the beauty that I was aware of. And in that first trip, I found it really hard to resolve anger, hate, fear. You know, they didn't really have a place in anything I was experiencing. They were distractions from what was beautiful. And I thought that was really interesting, especially once we talk about the second journey. And then the other part is that I had this real strong awareness. Once I'd talked for a while and processed things with my guides, I lay back down and just watched the music, you know, because I could watch the music. How often do you get to do that, you know? And so, and the cathedral was back when I shut my eyes and listened to the music, and I could, you know, see the music moving through the cathedral and the space. And for the benefit of resistance recovery, there was in the higher spaces of the cathedral, there were crows and ravens, and I realized that they were the messengers from one part of the cathedral to the other, you know, and so they would be flying back and forth, you know, crying out occasionally, and it was fascinating. That was pretty much it. And then they walk in. So after you come down, you know, once you come down off the stuff, everything goes back to normal. It's not like, you know, it's just like this sort of fading away. And then I could watch my day world, my consensus reality rebuild itself, which was really fascinating. You know, it slowed things down enough so that I could sort of watch it, you know, reconstruct as I was coming back in. And then, you know, after a few minutes, they bring in the questionnaires, and they spend like an hour answering tons of questionnaires about, you know, stuff. And so that was my first journey. It was wild and deep, really deep. I went deep. So, and so yeah.
So you come back and you have how long in between?
A month. So, and during that month, my I met with my guides twice, you know, so we talked twice in between. So there's sort of this integration, you know, process. And then I went back down.
Was there dissonance in your world?
Yes. Yeah. So they require after your day, they require that somebody pick you up. They don't want you wandering around the world. And so I had Andy, our friend Andy, be my you know, go-to person for all of this. And so he picked me up, and you know, I was talking about how beautiful it all was and everything. And but then we took a cab back to or an Uber back to the hotel, and got out of the car, and there were some people yelling at each other on the street. And I said to Andy, so consensus reality is a really strange thing after something like that. And so, yeah, there was a lot of dissonance. It was very, I felt really opened, and I was extremely sensitized to the world around me afterwards. And I'm a pretty sensitive person anyway. And so it's kind of like it sort of opened up or blew off, sort of veils that I'd put up. I like to say that my first journey rewired my brain, and my second journey reconstructed my psyche. And so, and so, yeah, it was real weird. I did this on a Thursday, flew back to Maine on a Friday, and had to preach on Sunday. And, so it was, but it was profound. And what I would say is the dissonance for my first journey was not so much in difficulty integrating as it was the awareness of realities impinging on this reality, the heightened awareness that we're not alone, that the veil is actually pretty thin between this world and the other worlds, and that their influence on this world is far greater than our influence.
So kind of a visceral experience of stuff that you'd already maybe believed,
yeah,
or was
yeah,
worldview. It was confirmation. But
confirmation, yeah. And that's one of the weird effects. I think it's actually a direct effect of the substance, is to in some way be a confirming element of the weird in your life, So when I came back, especially after my second experience, but also after the first, when I looked back at my mystical experiences that I'd had before this, I did not question them anymore. I wasn't like, oh, maybe it was just my brain misfiring, or did I really see that, or was that? It had a direct confirming effect that, oh yeah, that was an encounter with something, real, the really real, as Paul Tillich calls it, so. And,
so when you went back for the second one, was it with any kind of trepidation, or what was the headspace like?
Yeah, I was actually more nervous about the second one than I was the first, in part because I knew how deep stuff could go. It wasn't now that I'd had an experience, it wasn't all unknown unknowns, there were some known unknowns there. And I didn't really know what to expect. I was surprised. Looking back, I actually had more anxiety about the second one than I did the first one. So.
And they upped the dosage in the second one.
Yeah, so it goes to 30 milligrams per 100. So I want to say my dose was around 35 milligrams of psilocybin.
A third again higher.
Yeah, yeah. And so, it's a, I have no idea how, what do they call them? Heroic doses. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know if it's a heroic dose or not, but sounds like it to me. That's a friggin' ton of mushrooms there, dude.
And so you had a very different experience.
Yes, my second experience was way off the chain compared to the first. And, you know, um, the same ritual takes place and everything. And my second one,
Different
uh,
guy.
yeah, well, one of my guides was different. Claudia is her first name. She was supposed to be with me on the first one, but she was not able to be there for some reason. And so I had one different guide, but Bill was with me again. And the second one, things began to take effect more quickly. And I did not feel, once the effects started, I did not feel good at all. I was nauseous, I was dizzy, uh, and with the headphones on and the eye shades, I was in a tunnel of tentacles. I mean, it was, it was dark. There were these red iridescent flashes, and it was like I was surrounded by tentacles. I felt like my whole body was covered in like sea anemones with all those little fingers, and I felt like I was covered with those, and each of those fingers was conscious, or at least aware. And none of the information I was receiving from the currents that were going by me was good. It was all painful, awful, and I was hot. And I couldn't tell if I was hot or cold. You know, I try to put a blanket on, and I get too hot. And it finally became so uncomfortable, even having clothes on, having stuff touching my skin was uncomfortable. One palm was sweaty and the other one was dry. Um, I felt there was no comfortable position. I couldn't get comfortable at all. Sitting up, on my back, on my side, nothing was comfortable. Uh, I was pretty sure I was going to pass out. I had this ripping thirst that went from my lip. I could feel the thirst from my lips all the way to the bottom of my esophagus. And so I've never felt thirst like that. And it felt like it was tearing me apart. And I could feel the separation happening in my body. And it was just crazy. I was sure I was going to pass out. I thought I was having a massive allergic reaction, even though none of this stuff causes allergic reactions. It's one of the safest substances on the planet. There isn't even an LD50 for psilocybin. There's like no amount that will kill you. And so, um, and and so anyway, I thought for sure I was gonna die. I was like, they're gonna have to call Kate. I'm gonna end up in the emergency room at Johns Hopkins next door. Uh, and so it just kept escalating. And then I'd say, I'm sure I'm having an allergic reaction. Is there anything we can do? And they said, well, your blood pressure is the best it's ever been since you've been in this whole study. And your skin is cool, you're breathing normally, you're actually doing fine. So, I mean, one of the things I realized is that bodies have minds of their own. You know, there's all kinds of thought things we can do about how we experience our bodies. The bodies are like their own thing, you know, and we just suffer the experience of the body. And I'm not making a complete dualistic argument there. It's just they're doing their own thing, you know, bodies are. And so anyway, to increase the resistance that I was experiencing, Bill came over and he like laid his arm against my arm and told me to push as hard as I could against him. I guess this is like sort of a depth psychology technique to try to change the space for the experience. It did, you know, and it kind of pushed me into this angular, concrete, geometric space that kept closing in on me. I knew I was dying, and my brain was screaming at my body. My mind was screaming at my body, just let go. If you're gonna die, you're gonna die. And so just let it happen. And my body would not listen. And then something shifted, and you know, it was like an ego death. It was, you know, I became this Aztec god. You know, I was floating over this one of those giant play fields. Maybe it was an Aztec god, but you know those play fields in South America where they have the you know, the hole in either side, and they try to throw the ball through the hole. And it's this huge field. There were pyramids. I could see pyramids, the Mesoamerican pyramids and stuff. And this god was floating over this field, and there was lightning shooting out of his hands, and it was just pure rage and anger. This is what my experience of it was, and that this is what it is. This is a god of rage and anger, and that went on for a while, and I was moving around. I was thrashing around while all this is going on, and sort of moving back and forth and contorting my body in all weird ways, and then that went on for a while, and then it shifted to I became a raging bull in a cage in a dungeon in like a Roman Colosseum somewhere back in the day, and I was slamming against the bars to try to get out, and I knew that I was going to die. And all I knew as the bull was rage, power, and that I was going to die. And there were people there, and somehow I intuited that they were Christians. So this is like a very Philip K. Dick kind of thing, you know. We're all trapped in 70 AD in some dungeon in you know, the Near East and early Christianity. But anyway, they were trying to calm me down, these Christians who were also facing their death. They were going to be let out to die as well in the Colosseum. And so it was just pure rage and power. And I'm moving around, I'm thrashing around. I am not aware at all of myself. My ego has been obliterated at this point, and I am the thing that I'm doing. And then that shifted into sort of this column of smoke that went up, and I became a Hindu god, probably some aspect of Shiva, I would think. And this was just pure creativity. I was moving huge objects in this vast space, like planets, one space or another. And it was all about the creative act of moving things around in space. You know, it was like the proportionality mattered, and it wasn't even, is this beautiful or not? It was just moving stuff. And then I must have blacked out or something, because then I came to and I was lying down on the couch. There were cushions off the couch. The blanket had been thrown on the floor. And I kind of came to lying down, and I said, what just happened? Was that all a dream, or was I actually moving around that much? And they said, no, you were moving around. And then I said, what did you do to me? So, and you know, and they had to tell me several times during all of this, you're in the middle of a study at Johns Hopkins. You know, they try to remind you of the place where you are and what you're doing. And man, and then I sort of came to, and I felt much better. I felt really good, actually. It had this sort of purging aspect to it. And then we had this long talk about the nature of rage and power and my family of origin, and how, you know, stuff in my family of origin, my relationship with my father and stuff, and all of this sort of played in. And again, the information access was incredibly powerful. But what's funny is when I left, the next day, when I tried to remember that conversation, all I could remember was this green, pale green color. It's sort of a mint green. I've found no corollary since then that matches the color. But it was this, I remember that conversation as that green color. It's so strange. And so I hurt a lot at the end. I really hurt. And I thought for sure I'd be really sore the next day, but I wasn't. And again, Andy picked me up, and I looked horrible. I had dark circles under my eyes. My hair was a mess. You know, I was clearly coming out of something really difficult. And Andy's statement, after I told him a little bit about what had happened in front of Roland Griffiths and William Richards, he said, well, I think I've heard everything I need to hear about psychedelics so that I never have to experience this. It was wild in the truest sense of the word. It was uncultured. There was nothing. I had no, upon reflection, I had no sort of anchor points in my experience to say, oh yeah, you know, I can see where that comes from. And it was just out of the depths, you know. And
You said to me about it, you said, my cosmology can accommodate hell, but it cannot accommodate pure chaos.
oh, did I say that? That's a great line. I need to write that down. I'm going to write that down. Yeah, that's a good line. My cosmology. So anyway, yeah, that was an awakening for me. Accommodating chaos. Is interesting because I don't think of myself as a particularly ordered thinker necessarily. I always thought I had space in my world for chaos, you know, but this was, I don't think I had a clear understanding of the nature of chaos, to be perfectly honest. So, you know, and becoming other gods was so bizarre, you know. the questionnaires ask things like, did you have an experience of oneness with God? And I know they don't mean what I experienced. I'd ask, how do I answer this? I don't know how to answer this. If you become a God, is that oneness with the God? I don't think that's what you mean here. And so, you know, and they try not to influence you and just say, answer it however best you think, you know. And so, but anyway, go ahead. You were going to ask something else.
Well, I was just going to say that the integration of the two experiences combined, would you call that problematic?
Yeah, well, after my first experience, I came back and I was thoroughly entranced. You know, I was like, oh my gosh, the shimmering cathedral, you know, that's Teresa of Avila, you know, St. John of the Cross and all of this. And, you know, I had a whole outline for a book that I was going to design based on my first experience. And after my second experience, it just blew it all up. I had for months, I could not access how to make meaning of my second experience. And I think what's happened in the year and a half since I've gone through all that is that I've become comfortable with it wasn't meaningless. I don't know how to make meaning of it. And so I've become more comfortable with my inability to you know, make meaning or force meaning onto it, you know. So
on some level, it really was an encounter with the transcendent, narrow mind. It transcends your capacities.
Yeah, right. And certainly both did. The first one, I felt like I had anchors, you know, to sort of do that. The second one just sort of sliced through all those anchors, and, you know, you're in this free floating world in reality that.
So, you know. So when you make the decision to do the doctorate program, would you have done that if you hadn't done this, hadn't participated in the experiment?
Yeah, that's a great question. If you can give me 2 minutes so I can go use the bathroom.
Sure, hang on, I'll just pause it. I'll do it too.
So yeah, in terms of the influence of my experiences on doing the doctorate, yeah, it's a one-to-one kind of corollary. And part of the reason I decided to do it in the program I chose is it Leonard Sweet, you know, and so we got to spend time with him, you know, down at Andy's installation. And after that, Andy and a couple of his friends asked me to apply and be a part of it. And I understood then that there's a good fit between what stood out for me from my experiences and what the program was offering. And so it's the semiotics, the study of signs and symbols. And it seems to me that when we access those experiences, or when we encounter those alternate realities and entities, that we are that there's a symbolic realm to it, and also, you know, and in saying that, I don't want to just put it in the symbolic meaning, but it's also more than that. But one of the ways to develop understanding and meaning of what's happening in a deep spiritual experience, an extraordinary spiritual experience, is seeing where the signs and the symbols are linking up with the culture, and in my case, the church, you know, in the history of Christianity, in the faith. And so I just saw a lot of possibilities with it. And the other part of that is it allows me to expand, to not get hung up with my personal experience of the psychedelic experience. You know, I'm sort of intentionally expanding my perspective and view beyond just psychedelics, and that to include, you know, other things, in part because the study I was a part of was to trigger mystical experiences, you know. And I'm pretty sure what I had was a mystical experience. I just don't have a lot of understanding of the full meaning of it. And I think that's true of all mystical experiences. I think a true mystical experience, a true spiritual experience, you can have one and build an entire lifetime on it. I feel like I don't ever have to take psychedelics again. I could spend the rest of my life mining these two experiences without ever flagging in what's more underneath it, you know? So.
What do you think about so we have this audience, right?
Yeah, yeah.
You're going to have people in this audience who are, would say that psychedelics got them over the hump, relationship to recovery, where other things didn't.
Yep. Right.
There are at least a couple people of note in this group who would say, who seem to have a very strong correlation with spiritual experiences and psychedelics generally. And I'm kind of overstating that, but
yeah.
Psychedelics afford you a more intense spiritual experience.
Right.
Then there are other people in the group who are, they see this as quite problematic in relationship to addiction, because you're leaning into a substance, whether it's addictive or not.
Sure, yeah.
And some people feel that it gets them too close to whatever mindset they were in when they were actively using drugs.
Right.
I'm fairly agnostic on all this, just because I don't want to generalize from my own experience, and and the people who've had benefits from this, I don't in any way question that. That being said, though, you know, one thing about psychedelics is there's a certain economy in the psyche that if you are having spiritual experiences through a meditation practice or contemplative prayer, or even something more violent like breath work or something, you're messing with this sort of boundary. And of course we can use different models, but let's just use a model of ego and unconscious. You're thinning that. And to do that out of my own will, my own discipline, my own just polishing, and, you know, then maybe not, something happens. Very different than taking a substance.
Yeah.
Throws that door forcibly open. Which is,
Right.
and somebody could contradict me on that and say, well, there are people that drink ayahuasca and nothing happens. Of course, there's people that
Sure.
say something always happens. So I
Yeah,
mean,
right.
even when nothing happens, something happens.
Yeah, yeah.
So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think what I'd say is, not uh, having a lot of direct experience in addiction circles in particular. I mean, I what I would say is two things. One, uh, they can help. I mean, the studies show across the board that you know the like for cigarette smokers to quit smoking cigarettes, one trip can erase the addiction. Nothing. There are no. There are no drugs you can take. There are no therapies you can do that can end nicotine addiction like psychedelics.
Well, I guess I want to be clearer. I'm not so much asking you about their value
Yeah.
for the addicted. I'm asking you about what do you think about this distinction between doing practices that are more under your control, that are disciplined,
Yeah,
versus
yeah,
the,
right, right, ripping it off.
yeah.
Yeah. And so I understand what you're asking, and it's related in the sense that this the spiritual experience, the mystical experience, the insight that happens whether you've taken a psychedelic or had the insight through meditation, I think comes to the same thing. You've opened up channels of perception to a greater reality than you were perceiving before. And Gurdjieff used to say, if there's in order to become enlightened, if there's a pill, you take it. If there's a hill to climb, you climb it. You just, you take it, steal it, grab it, whatever you need to do to get it. And I think it's hard to discern how much is his being a spiritual clown and how much is serious with a lot of what Gurdjieff said. But I do think that I'm not sure in the final analysis it actually matters whether you achieved it through a psychedelic or through meditation or through some spontaneous event that had happened to you. I think that in a way, well, let me back up. I had a goal in doing the psychedelic experience with Johns Hopkins, and my desire, which has been my desire ever since I was a little kid, was to be able to have a insight or an experience of the superstructure of reality. I've never believed that, I tried, but I've never been a materialist, is what I'm trying to say. I've always believed that what we perceive hovers on a deeper superstructure, and that's primarily spiritual, symbolic, this sort of deeper sensory experience that's beyond the five senses or more, depending on how you talk about them. And so there's all kinds of ways of getting underneath that. And I've done a lot of them. I've meditated for years. I've practiced Tai Chi for years. I still practice it. You know, I'm a pretty, I've meditated, I've done all the things. And so this was just one more thing in the arsenal of spiritual disciplines. I kind of think of it as just one more pathway. I don't really place a lot of, what's the word I'm looking for? Differentiation or judgment between them, you know? The boundary, let's put it this way, the boundary between those spontaneous experiences that you might have that push you through the veil and the active taking of a substance that releases the veil, between those extremes, I think it's a very cloudy area. We're altering our consciousness all the time during the day. And so does it really matter if you're doing it through a cup of coffee or through a deep meditation experience or a psychedelic, you know, or being out in the woods and breathing fresh air?
No, I'm in essential agreement with that. The thing that, you know, moved a little further in the conversation, but I guess I'll try to do it anyway. I guess for me, sometimes I wonder what it is. Okay.
That's fair. I know less now than I did before, so I might not be the best.
Yeah. So you say, you know, you can keep climbing the mountain, you can get it through the psilocybin, you can get it through the dojo. You know, so somebody, I wish I could remember who it was, but I recently was listening to somebody and he was talking about crossing these thresholds. And he says, you know, there's often what, you know, this metaphor, but sometimes it's literally true. So you cross the threshold and you either bring something back or you don't bring something back, or if you bring something, you might bring something back and it kind of fades or vanishes. And he really believed that he's quasi Jamesian, but he believes that the real measure here, value judgment, is, does it have ripples? Does this thing you brought back ripple out into the world and have these effects? Not always effects that you can anticipate.
Right.
Taking it for granted, positive effects.
Yeah.
And one of the, you know, really mystifying things about psychedelics is, you know, and I've probably the reason why I'm talking about this is I've done too many of them by my standards. That I can relate to you a few high points, but most of everything is forgotten. And I do, but I've had this experience many times of, like, when I'm in the state, I am holding it. I am holding some metaphysical truth.
Yeah.
That I couldn't tell you what it was now.
They can't transfer from, the reality,
Right.
Yeah.
And so then you look at these things in terms of specific goals, like healing from addiction or whatever. It's different than metaphysical exploration.
Well, one of the questions I've been asking of late, and I asked you about this too, we've talked about this before, but, you know, what happened? I mean, what did I actually do in this? You know, did I do anything at all? And has anything really changed? Or now what? You know? And I don't have a good answer. I think that's probably true. I think it's more, boy, I don't know how to put it, other than there's an act of the will, and I know there's all kinds of questions around the nature of the will, but there's an act of the will in relationship with these things that seems to be required in order to in order to break through to healing or to a deeper sensibility of relationship and the self, and to just do it. And I don't mean to diminish other people's experience by any means. I think the nature of the experience can either impact you in such a way that you take actions afterwards, or you go into it with a determination to be changed, you know. But there does require some activation of the will in order to engage whatever is coming to you or through you, through it, you know.
Yeah.
And it's hard.
That seems like that applies to life generally in some weird way, that we have a choice to, this came out of the kind of Simone Weil discussion, that we have a choice, we can choose reality at the expense of our fantasies. And this is not a cold materialist reality, this is
No, I understand, yeah.
spiritual consent.
Yeah.
Or we can persist in things that make us feel safe or ideal, or however you want to put it.
Yeah.
It's just so funny that at this late stage in the game, what a lot of these kinds of conversations bring up for me is like moral development.
I hear you. Yeah. I think part of what I hear you getting at, and what I think about in relationship to these things is, you know, you're right, it's true through all of life, that sort of activation of the will. But I think we only get a few moments of true clarity about the thing that we're committed to in order to activate the will. You know, it requires some commitment to a particular way or truth or element of being. Otherwise, it's not worth doing, you know? And so, and I think all of us just sort of hang, or festoon is the word C.S. Lewis uses for it. You know, we festoon our being and our beliefs on very few truths that we've experienced or come across in our lives. You know, there's usually only a couple of them. It's not so to merely activate the will because I think it's a good idea, or other people have told me I should change, or relative to society, I don't feel like I'm fitting in. Those are never gonna complete, you know. It has to be in relationship to some conviction or commitment, you know. And I'm not gonna attempt to define what that commitment should be, but you know, I'm a Christian pastor. That, I mean, you know, I think it's kind of clear where mine lies, but I'm not gonna relative to this, certainly, I'm not gonna make that the standard for everybody. But I do think that that there has to be that, solid's the wrong word, but that matrix that we trust in and rely on from one day to the next, you know.
Does this experience relate to that?
Well, it does. The first one for sure, you know, the first one uh, is an easy yes to that. You know, I could, you know, that just melded right into my faith commitments and all of that with no, the second one didn't, I actually feel even more convicted, I guess would be the word, after my second one rather than less, which is strange to me. But it's expanded my understanding of for instance, here's a dilemma, just a thought experiment that I've been dealing with ever since the evening of my second journey. What does it mean to be a monotheist if I became a god? You know, and not just one, but two, you know? And if I have an experience of becoming gods, what does that do to the sense of monotheism? And so far, the only thing I've come up with is I am not sure monotheism means what I thought it meant, you know, and that there's all kinds of places in Scripture, both New Testament and Old Testament, but particularly the Old Testament, where, you know, it's clear there's other gods. And even Paul, it's a category error. You know, monotheism is speaking towards a category error, not whether or not there's other gods. It's prioritizing gods. And so that's sort of been a powerful insight, one that's just come in the past month, I would say. And so
the experiences sound very dialectical.
Yeah, like yeah. And so
they're meant to be bookended, and they're maybe they're supposed to speak to each other or something, or something, some between to be had or discovered, or
right. Or as the Taoists put it, the one in the many thousand things, you know. So sort of that kind of dialectic in a way.
The second one sounds, I mean, the becoming the gods and all that, that's one side of it. But that initial part, you know, that shit sounds Lovecraftian.
Oh, I know. It was horrible. Horrible.
Like, there are spiritual things out there that you are a specimen.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And how does Charles Fort put it? We basically we're cattle. He says we're cattle, and you know, that's from Jeffrey Kripal's, one of his books. Authors of the Impossible. Yeah, and but yeah, you know, and the issue, of course, in the Lovecraft sensibility is once you see, they see, you know, and so now you're on the radar.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I for myself, and I'm speaking personally here, I'm pretty sure I was already on the radar. I mean, you know, and because I've seen through, not like that, but you know, I think part of what we're sort of dancing around here, or at least I'm dancing around, is, you know, what have you opened up, either into your psyche or into the world, even when you've opened yourself to those things, you know. And if you put any ontological reality to those experiences, which I kind of do, and I can't tell if I do because I like the idea of it or if I actually believe it. I'm not sure yet, but
well, there's certainly a literature on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually tend philosophically, theologically, and otherwise that I encountered true things that exist outside of me, you know. And, and if that's the case, what are they doing? What am I doing in relationship to them? And now what? Now that I've been seen and they've seen me.
Right. Now that you're in relationship.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
it's very striking that the first experience was a deepening and a confirmation and elaboration of Christian convictions.
Mm-hmm.
The second one was like, but there's this too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, don't forget. And I think, I suppose one of the arguments from sort of I don't have a background in this, so I'm really making a cartoon character out of some of this, although I do take some of the critique seriously, is, you you don't you just don't want to monkey around with the demonic. You don't want to open doors to it. You don't want to create thin spaces for it. And those are just things that are best left there. And my argument would be, for those of us who have already had some insight into evil or the experience of chaos in this world, it seems to me better to understand at least some of the characters that are trying to act on us,
Right.
And
Behind those crimes, if you will.
yeah, and have begin to develop some, if not defense, at least a sensibility of what's being dealt with, and and to be clear, I don't feel like I have to defend myself against the things I saw. I just know they're there now, and it makes for a very weird walk through the world. You and I have talked about, let me clarify a little bit what I mean by that. I don't mean necessarily the material world. I just mean that the world is far, far stranger than what we give it credence for. And for millennia, we walked around with an understanding that there were forces acting on us that we had very little control over. And we put names to it: the demonic, witchcraft, all kinds of stuff, fairies, whatever, angels. And, we, and I think we do ourselves a huge disservice as a modern world. We've so narrowed our perception of what the world actually is and our experience in it. And now, I mean, just to speak to what we're experiencing now we've created an environment that allows the world to manifest that complete narrowing of experience, isolate, stay at home, all for good reason. I mean, it's been 100 years since we've had a pandemic. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that you can manifest in reality what we're doing in our minds.
Yeah, and I think there's certainly a lot of spiritual teachers that say that this is just an expression of all that.
Yeah, right. And we've done it by narrowing our perception of the world. Mm-hmm. And so, and it includes spiritual things, mental, I've often thought that we do far better thinking about ideas and feelings as being outside of us and coming into us from the outside, and rather than thinking of it being a production of our minds and our brains.
That's right. I think that's right.
Mm-hmm.
So here's the deal. We are basically out of time.
Yeah.
Really wanted to tackle the thesis a lot more, but maybe this is all better because we get the thesis done,
Mm-hmm.
tested and tucked in, and then we have that to visit.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, we can certainly come back to it. I think that'd be fun. This has been great. I've enjoyed it. So
Thoroughly. Oh yeah, it's gonna get a lot of views, I'm sure.
yeah, it's weird. I'll grant it's weird. So, and we didn't even talk about, we talked about spiritual things, but we didn't even talk about it in relationship to, you know, the Christian faith, which would be an interesting.
No, and I kind of think that's sort of a big part of the paper. Okay, well,
Yeah, man.
thank you so much.
Thank you. It's great to see you.
Good to be seen. Good to see you.
Yep,
Till next time.
indeed.